As we gather today, let us remember that we in the Diocese of Northern Michigan acknowledge the sacred land where we work, live, teach, learn, and build community. This land is the territory of the Anishinaabe people. We recognize the repeated violations of sovereignty, territory, and water perpetrated by European and other settlers that have impacted the original inhabitants of this land. We extend our respect to citizens of these First Nations people who live here and their ancestors who have lived here for over 500 generations, and to all Indigenous people. We also know that this acknowledgement is insufficient. It does not undo the harm that has been done and continues to be perpetrated now against Indigenous people, their land, air, and water.
Let us build a house where love can dwell and all can safely live. A place where saints and children tell how hearts learn to forgive. Built of hopes and dreams and visions, rock of faith and vault of grace. Here the love of Christ shall end divisions. All are welcome, all are welcome, all are welcome in this place. Let us build a house where prophets speak and words are strong and true, where all God's children dare to seek, to dream God's reign anew. Here the cross shall stand as witness and a symbol of God's grace. Here at one we claim the faith of Jesus. All are welcome, all are welcome, all are welcome in this place. Let us build a house where love is found in water, wine, and wheat, a banquet hall on holy ground where peace and justice meet. Here the law of God through Jesus is revealed in time and space, as we share in Christ the peace that frees us. All are welcome, all are welcome, all are welcome in this place. Let us build a house where hands will reach beyond the wood and stone, to heal and strengthen, serve and teach, and live the word they've known. Hear the outcast and the stranger bear the image of God's face. Let us bring an end to fear and danger. All are welcome, all are welcome, all are welcome in this place. All are welcome, all are welcome, all are welcome in this
A reading from the Gospel according to Matthew. Whoever welcomes you welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me. Whoever welcomes a prophet in the name of a prophet will receive a prophet's reward. And whoever welcomes a righteous person in the name of a righteous person will receive the reward of the righteous. And whoever gives even a cup of cold water to one of these little ones in the name of a disciple, truly I tell you, none of these will lose their reward. The Gospel of the Lord. Thanks be to God. The town I went to high school in was small for Central California. It was conservative, predominantly white, and predominantly evangelical Christian. For having a population of roughly 2,200 people and the actual town being exactly 1 mile long, the town of Mariposa boasted 13 churches. Mariposa County High School and its nearly 400 students were no different, mostly white, mostly conservative, and mostly evangelical. Several of my teachers went to the church where my father was the pastor. In a lot of ways, it mirrored the most small, rural towns across America. And like most adolescents, the struggle to fit into the culture around you while simultaneously rebelling against that same culture was in full swing. I had seen Risha around the school my junior year. She was quiet, stuck to the fringes. She was tall, thin, with dark hair that she kept short. She was on the women's soccer team, though not a popular athlete or a popular person. She didn't wear what the other girls in town wore, and instead wore what she wanted: large overalls, covered in paint, with clunky work boots. She often looked a bit disheveled, and at least to the outside observer had no intention of fitting in. She took AP classes and was often buried in a book. Being the school outcast, stories circulated around about her. I heard once that she was from a Romani family. Another story talked about how she and her mother were witches and that her father ran off with someone else. My junior year, I took a cultural history class. Our first day, I walked into the class and took my usual place toward the back of the room. A few moments later, Risha walked in and took the seat behind me, the last seat in the row. As people chatted, I said hello to my friends who came and sat around me as we waited for class to begin. I didn't say a word to Risha. To the dominant culture, speaking to the outcast puts yourself at risk of being cast aside yourself. To say hello to Risha was to step outside of what was acceptable to my very conservative world. And, as an adolescent wanting to fit in, I decided to play by their rules. Partly through class, someone next to me passed out Starburst, small chewy candies, each one individually wrapped. I took one, as did a few others. The person next to me passed one to Risha, and we all looked on as the action took place, but none of us said anything. The class went on, and we were silent. Exactly 30 seconds before the bell to end class, Risha suddenly stood up and placed something on the corner of my desk. She quickly grabbed her bag and began to walk briskly to the door so that when she reached the doorknob, the bell rang and she was free to exit the room. I looked at the corner of my desk, and there, neatly folded out of a yellow Starburst wrapper, sat a small folded paper crane. Instantly, I felt horrible, and as the class emptied, I stayed at my desk looking at that tiny work of art and realized that I had been a fool. Whoever welcomes you welcomes me, Jesus said. That is where our reading starts today. At the heart of our gospel reading today sits the action of welcoming, of hospitality. The prophet is to be welcomed as a prophet, the righteous in the name of the righteous. All are to be welcomed as they are, because isn't that how Jesus welcomes us? It does not begin with us welcoming the outcast and those with whom the world has thrown away. That can be done simply out of a command, rote action with no meaning. It begins with us being welcomed, a deeply personal experience. These words of Jesus come in the midst of a series of teachings which were inflammatory and seemed to flip the present-day culture on its head. Do not think that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I've come not to bring peace, but a sword, he said to a startled crowd. So when he proclaimed just a few verses later that whoever welcomed them also welcomed Jesus, they knew to look for how different this was to the world around them. As they recognized where they were welcomed as they were, they naturally would also have to grapple with when they had been unwelcomed for who they were, when they had been kept outside the group, when they had been thrown away. Jesus asked them to understand how they themselves were outcasts in order to shift their perspective to those the culture kept on the margins. The verses end with Jesus telling us that if we do these things, we won't lose our rewards. So what are the rewards Jesus is talking about? Maybe it's a better understanding of ourselves and our relationship to the God who loves us. And maybe because of a better understanding of ourselves and our relationship to God, we are able to live in such a way that helps support those around us and moves us a little more in the direction of healing our broken and hurting world. So the next day in class, when Risha came in, I thanked her for the paper crane. We began chatting and over the semester became friends. I discovered that she was incredibly intelligent and witty and funny. She was committed to her ideas and how she viewed the world. She was a feminist and a communist. She was a committed atheist and loved the diversity of the human experience. She lived with her mother in a van sometimes when they didn't have enough money, but they were happy. She wasn't a witch and was a remarkable writer and artist. But because I had kept the assumptions of my conservative group, I hadn't seen any of this. One way to look at this situation was to say that she had been removed from the culture of that little town. But to hear her talk about it, she had decided that the culture of that little town was too small for her, and so she had stepped outside it. And the miracle was not that Risha and I became friends. The miracle was that Risha invited me, welcomed me into her world that was bigger and bolder and more beautiful than the little safe one that I had been trying to be a part of. And because of that welcome, because of that shift, I am no longer willing to subscribe to our culture's definition of who's in and who's out. I try to welcome others because I was welcomed once by a girl in school who the rest of the town had shunned and thrown away. I try to welcome others not simply because Jesus said so, but because I know what it feels like for someone to reach out to me and how that action changed the way I saw myself and the world around me. Risha folded a paper crane out of a Starburst wrapper, and it forever changed the way I see the world. In truth, Risha taught me how to live the gospel and how to be a Franciscan. She would never use those words and would probably be horrified to hear me say all this about her. But it's true. That is the power of welcome, of hospitality. It changes people, the ones who are welcomed and the ones who throw open the doors and welcome people in. That's why it sits at the center of Jesus' teaching, because it has the power to change the world. And for that, I'm grateful.
sit at the welcome table. I'm gonna sit at the welcome table one of these days. I'm gonna sit at the welcome table. I'm gonna sit at the welcome table one of these days. I'm gonna feast on the milk and honey. Oh, I'm gonna feast on the milk and honey one of these days. I'm gonna feast on milk and honey. I'm gonna feast on milk and honey one of these days. I'm gonna walk and talk with Jesus. Oh, I'm gonna walk and talk with Jesus one of these days. I'm gonna walk and talk with Jesus. I'm gonna walk and talk with Jesus one of these days. I'm gonna drink at the crystal fountain. Oh, I'm gonna drink at the crystal fountain one of these days. I'm gonna drink at the crystal fountain. I'm gonna drink at the crystal fountain one of these days. Oh, God's gonna set this world on fire. Oh, God's gonna set this world on fire one of these days. God's gonna set this world on fire. Gonna set this